At just 17 years old, Alexandre Pato moved to AC Milan, and within 2 years he was already being talked about as one of the most exciting young footballers in the world. He was fast, he was powerful, he could dribble, finish and score from almost anywhere. He even scored twice at the Santiago Bernabéu against Real Madrid while he was still just 20 years old. By 2009, Pato had won the Golden Boy Award, and it looked like Brazilian football had found its next superstar. But then everything started to go wrong. Injuries kept appearing, his confidence disappeared, his career began to fall apart, and the player who once looked destined for the very top ended up playing in Brazil, China, America, and eventually away from professional football altogether. So how did one of the biggest wonderkids in the world disappear? This is the story of Alexandre Pato. Pato's story began in Brazil, where he joined International's academy and quickly showed that he wasn't an ordinary teenager. He made his senior debut at just 17 years old, scoring almost immediately. And before long, European clubs were watching. AC Milan eventually won the race, signing Pato in 2007 for around €24 million. But because of FIFA's rules surrounding non-EU minors, he had to wait until January 2008 before making his competitive debut. And when that debut finally came, he made sure nobody forgot it. Milan beat Napoli 5-2, and Pato scored on his Serie A debut. He finished his first season with 9 goals in 18 league appearances. For most teenagers, that would already be incredible. But Pato was only getting started. The following season, Pato exploded. Playing alongside players like Kaká, Ronaldinho, Andrea Pirlo and David Beckham, the teenager became one of Milan's most exciting attackers. He scored 18 goals in all competitions during the 2008 season, finishing as Milan's top scorer. And then came one of the moments that really made people take notice. In October 2009, Milan travelled to the Santiago Bernabéu to face Real Madrid. Pato was 20 years old, and he scored twice against Real Madrid at the Bernabéu. The second goal was especially memorable, as Pato found space inside the box and calmly finished past Iker Casillas. This wasn't some promising youngster scoring against a small team. This was a 20-year-old walking into one of the biggest stadiums in world football and deciding the game. By the end of 2009, Pato had won the Golden Boy Award, beating the likes of Stevan Jovetic and finishing ahead of other highly rated young players. The hype was enormous, and for good reason, because when Pato was fit, he looked absolutely ridiculous. He had the pace to run behind defenders, the strength to hold them off, and the technique to finish with either foot. He looked like the complete striker, and then his body started betraying him. The first major warning signs came during the 2009/10 season. Pato suffered repeated muscular injuries, including problems with his hamstrings. He would return, score, look dangerous, and then get injured again. In February 2010, he scored twice against Atalanta before suffering another hamstring injury. He missed crucial games against Roma and Manchester United, and after returning, he injured the same muscle again. Eventually, his season was over. He had still scored 14 Serie A goals, but he had only managed 20 league appearances. And this was the beginning of a brutal cycle. Pato would get injured, he would recover, he would return to the pitch, he would look brilliant, and then he'd get injured again. The problem wasn't that Pato suddenly became a bad footballer. It was that he couldn't stay on the pitch long enough to become the footballer everyone expected him to be. It wasn't just his career that was being affected. The injuries began to affect Pato mentally. In his own account of his career, Pato has described becoming scared of getting injured and losing confidence in his own body. He was constantly thinking about whether the next sprint, the next challenge, or the next movement would cause another problem. Imagine being one of the most talented young footballers on the planet and being afraid that your own body might stop you from playing. That was becoming Pato's reality. He missed out on Brazil's 2010 World Cup squad, and the pressure around him continued to grow. People weren't asking whether Pato was talented anymore. Everyone knew he was talented. They were asking why he couldn't stay fit. And eventually Milan decided they had to move on. In January 2013, at just 23 years old, Pato left AC Milan and returned to Brazil with Corinthians. Think about that for a second. 23. He had already scored 63 goals for Milan, won Serie A, won the Italian Super Cup and played for Brazil. But instead of entering his prime in Europe, he was going home. And Pato wasn't giving up. He wanted to rebuild his career. He wanted to get fit. He wanted to get back to the player everyone thought he could become. But Corinthians didn't go according to plan. He struggled for consistency, and one of the lowest moments came when he attempted a Panenka penalty against Grêmio in the Copa do Brasil. And it was saved. His confidence was taking another hit. Within a year, Pato was sent out on loan to São Paulo, and strangely, this was where things started to look better. At São Paulo, Pato began scoring again. He started to look more like the player Milan had fallen in love with. The pace was still there. The finishing was still there. And suddenly, there was another question. Could Alexandre Pato actually come back? In 2015, he scored 26 goals for São Paulo in all competitions. Then, in January 2016, came the opportunity Pato had been waiting for. Chelsea, the Premier League, another chance to prove himself at the highest level. Surely, this was the comeback. But it wasn't. Pato made just 2 appearances for Chelsea. He scored on his Premier League debut against Aston Villa from the penalty spot. But that was basically it. At the end of the season, he returned to Corinthians. And just a few months later, he was moving again. This time to Villarreal. The comeback had failed again, and this is where Pato's career started to look completely different from what everyone had imagined. Instead of becoming one of the world's best strikers, he was moving from club to club trying to find somewhere he could feel like himself again. Villarreal lasted only half a season. Then came China. In 2017, Pato joined Tianjin Quanjian, and although he was scoring goals again, the move effectively took him away from European football. The teenager who had once scored twice at the Bernabéu was now playing thousands of miles away from the spotlight. But Pato still wasn't finished. In 2019, he returned to São Paulo. It was another attempt to restart his career, another chance, another comeback. But after 35 appearances and 9 goals during his second spell, São Paulo terminated his contract in 2020. And by this point, the question had changed. It was no longer, can Pato become a superstar? It was, can Pato find a club where he can stay? Then came Orlando City. In 2021, at the age of 31, Pato moved to Major League Soccer. By now, he was a completely different player from the teenager who had terrified defenders in Italy. But perhaps that isn't the saddest part of the story, because Pato never completely lost his talent. He just never managed to consistently show it. His career had become a series of almost comebacks. Milan, Corinthians, São Paulo, Chelsea, Villarreal, China, São Paulo again, Orlando. Every time there was another opportunity to restart, and every time something stopped him from reaching the level everyone once expected. Pato eventually announced his retirement from professional football in 2023. He was only 33 years old, and suddenly the career that had once looked like it could become legendary was over. But was Alexandre Pato actually a failure? Honestly, no. He scored 63 goals for AC Milan. He won Serie A. He played for Brazil. He won the Golden Boy Award. He scored against Real Madrid at the Bernabéu. Most footballers would dream of having that career. But Pato wasn't judged against most footballers. He was judged against the player everyone thought he was going to become. And that's the difference. When you are 20 years old, scoring twice against Real Madrid, winning the Golden Boy Award and being labelled one of the next great Brazilian forwards, good career doesn't feel good enough. We never got to see the finished version of Pato. We saw flashes of it. At Milan, at São Paulo, for Brazil, but never for long enough. His injuries didn't simply take games away from him. They took momentum away from him. Every time he started building confidence, something would happen. Every time he started looking like himself again, another setback arrived. And eventually, the football world moved on. New wonderkids appeared. New Brazilian stars emerged. And Alexandre Pato became a name people remembered rather than a player they watched every weekend. Maybe that's the real tragedy. Pato wasn't a player who had no talent. He wasn't a player who never reached the top. He reached the top. He just couldn't stay there. And somewhere along the way, one of football's most exciting young superstars became one of its biggest what-ifs. Alexandre Pato had everything needed to become a legend: the pace, the skill, the finishing, the confidence. But football doesn't always care about potential. Sometimes all it takes is a body that won't cooperate. That was enough to change everything. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe and check out one of the videos on screen now. Thanks for watching.